Uh, Thank you, Kavita, and a very warm welcome to all the participants this morning. And I begin my initial presentation on industrial relations, understanding the dynamics in the turbulent scenario which we have gone through. Well, the unrest which has happened in the industrial relations over the last couple of years is well known to all of us. What happened in Manesar in 2010, problems the RICO in 2009, and again problems around northern part of the country in 2011 are well known. The kind of flash strikes, workers' protests, and so on are in front of you in some of the newspaper cuttings. The discontent continued and even spread to Dehradun, the Uttarakhand, as you know, and we had problems spreading in various other parts of the country. The effect has been again visible through the various newspaper cuttings, strike eating into the livelihood of the people, not only the workmen but also the villages around, which are highly dependent on the whatever was happening in the plants, whether be it Manesar or elsewhere. The problems in the ancillary units, which also had to be at the brunt. You could see the pictures in front of you, the fire which really literally spread during this period. And it was around 2011 and early 12 when we thought that the worst is over. But again, in 2012, in July 18, we had another huge problem in Maruti Manesar. The worker went on a rampage, and you know, the general manager of HR, Manish Kumar Dev, was very unfortunately murdered. Well, the plants got closed, and you can see a pictures in front of you as what happened. People were hurt, they were in hospital, in very large number of people in and around Gurgaon. Over 90, as I say, Maruti officials got hospitalized. It was kind of a terrorism at work, as said by few of us. It's not just about Maruti. Manesar violence may dent India's image. You can read the statement of Mr. Naik when he says, whatever be the relationship between the workers and the management, it should not have resulted in what happened with the general manager. Such an act is absolutely undesirable, and I condemn it. And so said Azim Premji and I.D. Godrej and many others. If we look at the history since 2008, in September 2008 in Greater Noida, the CEO of the company, Mr. Lalit Chaudhary, was murdered in a company called Graziano Trasmissioni Limited. I was on the board of that company at that point of time, and I saw this very unfortunate incident when a large number of workers, about 200 in numbers, entered the plant, picked up the gears, transmission rods, and so on, and hit a large number of executives and eventually murdered Mr. Chaudhary. And since then, the history is in front of you. September 2009 in Coimbatore, Mr. Roy George was murdered, who was the HR VP of Tricol. November 2010 in Ghaziabad, Mr. Joginder Singh, again the HR manager of Allied Nippon, was murdered. 2011 in Odisha, the murder of Mr. Radheshyam Roy, who is the DGM HR in Pomex Steel Division, took place. January 2012, again in Pondicherry, Chandrasekhar, the President of Operations for Regency Ceramics, was murdered. April 12, murder of Mr. Rajeshwaran, DGM HR, and 18th July 2012, the unfortunate incident, which is still not out of memory, which took place in Maruti Manesar. I have in front of you some government data on the strikes and lockouts. Industrial relations units which were affected since last 3 years in the period January to May, the information which we have in front of you. In 2010, we have 101 strikes, which got reduced in 2011. That's what I had mentioned somewhere. We thought the worst is over and things are improving. It was only, again, in January to May 2012, I have the data that the figures came back to 88 strikes. Similarly, lockouts, which have come down, though they have come down, but they are still there. But if you look at the man days lost, which were 130 lakhs in 2010, in the same period, they were about 7.3 lakhs in January, May 2011, and 2012, again, they went up to 9 lakhs. Workers who got affected by the strikes, about 2.24 lakhs in period 2010, reduced to 51,000 in 2011, and went out to big figure of 3.151 lakhs in period 2000, same period in 2012. And so do the lockouts, though they have come down comparatively. If you look at the data on retrenchment and closures, industrial units which are affected by during this period by retrenchment, yes, they have come down from 11 to 2, but the closures, as you can see, which were 8 in 2011, went up to 13. Workers which are affected through this have also, though have come down, but they still exist. The writing is up on the wall for all to see. Industrial relations cannot be ignored anymore. Let's go back to the basics and let's analyze what's happening in industrial relations. This has been a decade of growth. We have excellent GDP growth through the 10 years, excepting for the last 1 or 2 years when it slightly slowed down, but it's a decade of growth. There has been an internationalization of Indian businesses. Many of the Indian companies have opened shops outside. They have acquired companies outside the country, whether Tata's, you know, who acquired big units, and even the small auto components companies, medium to large size, have also gone ahead and made a lot of acquisition. And similarly, a lot of industrial houses from overseas have opened shop in India. There has been an internationalization of management compensation structure. We all know the compensation, especially of the top management and the senior management, is becoming closer and closer to what the international standards are. If you read today's Economic Times, you would have seen that the compensation of the CEOs compared to top management is 3 to 4 times in many companies. In auto sector, it is about 4.4 times. And it's the top management itself, which is fairly large in compensation, which has grown over the last decade. And the gap between the workers and the management has increased. India is under tremendous cost pressures. While on one side, the compensation might have gone up for the top management, India is treated as a low labor cost country. And the expectations of all of us in the world competitive market that we have to produce at extremely low cost to become competitive with China and others. There has also been a change in terms of increase of temporaries, contractual labor, and leasing, and probably it is largely because of fluctuation in production and changing requirements of the market. They have been expanding businesses. Now they have many more sites for the companies than they used to have before, and new processes are getting introduced, especially with the multinationals and companies coming from overseas to India, and India opening shops outside. Many of the companies, especially which are Japanese, who have a Japanese relationship, either in terms of some kind of a contractually or otherwise in terms of knowledge, a lot of cut and paste of global processes has taken place over the last few years. The new generation of entrepreneurs are coming who are younger. At the same time, a new generation of workforce have also come in who are very young, inexperienced many a times, and probably do not understand the values of what relationships between the management and workmen should have. Even the basic principles of trade union movements are also not known to them. There has been a lot of focus on growth, but not really on the growth partners. The growth partners being all those, the human resources which probably lead to this growth. There has been a bloated confidence of industrialists, as one has seen, largely because of successes which have taken place over the years. We need to appreciate that the real engine of growth is not only the plant, machinery, equipment, and technology, but it is our workforce. In the end of the day, you bet on the people you have and not really on the strategies or the equipment. Somewhere the workforce has got sidelined. There have been camouflaged undercurrents. India's relations have got ignored, and it doesn't mean that industrial relations have been in excellent shape. There have been dormant issues which probably have got camouflaged with the undercurrents, which are probably sometimes not visible to the people in the top management. The gap has kept on increasing over the period of time. Let's understand the dynamics of IR a little more. Industrial relations is a matter of expectation which the management have from the unions have from the management, and also the workers have from the union and the management and the unions have for the workers. It's all about expectations amongst all of them. It is the principles of trust and relationship are the very basics of industrial relations. Very often we look at industrial relations as a situational logic. It is not always situational, it's much more than that. Situation is what is visible to us, but I think the logic has to go beyond what is visible, but what the undercurrents are, what's happening behind or below the surface. We need to strive for industrial harmony than peace. I think harmony is something which we say it is the agreement in opinion and feelings, while peace is rather temporary. Harmony is all about processes and peace is about end results. As we say, the correct Hindi word for harmony, as we say, is Madhur Sambandh. So peace can be bought, but harmony cannot be bought. We need to develop it. This is the matter of processes, and this is what industrial relations is all about. Relating industrial relations situation with the business dynamics is now a lot of it is happening in the boardroom, which is away from the reality of situations. I remember one of the very senior person from Maruti, probably 2 or 3 weeks before this unfortunate incident happened, talked about what all right things which are happening in various parts of the company in terms of industrial relations. And it appeared as though everything is hunky-dory. But obviously what was happening at the grassroots levels was somewhat different. And what transpired 2 or 3 weeks after that presentation was totally a different word. So industrial relations is not about the business dynamics in the boardroom. It is much beyond that. Here people management is the key, and capability of handling industrial relation is what is required today. Understanding a little more on the dynamics, globalization and liberalization are resulting in very fast growth, which is resulting in a very highly competitive scenario all around. There is a need for flexible employment and regulation which we need. There are archaic labor laws, disparate labor practices across the country which are well known. There is social economic dynamics which are resulting in aspirations of young workers which are very different. Workers of yesterday and workers of today are very different, largely because of whether it's the media or the education or the other aspirations which are coming with the time. Spurt of young leaders who require guidance has increased tremendously. We see a very huge labor today who are very young. Many of them have just come out of the ITIs and they all need guidance. Their energies need to be properly channelized. Widening the communication gap between stakeholders. There is a gap which is only getting larger and larger between various stakeholders, whether it's the management, union, or the workmen. And the nature of employment is also changing with time. So let's see what are the key issues before us. I've divided the issues into three categories. The flexibility in manpower deployment, which largely relates to contract labor and Industrial Disputes Act. There's a requirement of simplification and rationalization of labor laws at large, and the issues relating to trade unions, their formation and their recognition. Let me take one by one. Let's first take the flexibility in manpower deployment. If you look at the contract labor, I have presented two viewpoints, the viewpoint of the industry and the viewpoint of the trade unions, which we have learned in our interactions with trade union, and also the experience which we have in various meetings with the management, with the workmen, and also with the unions. The industry view is that the casual labor is required for flexibility and for cost reduction. We need casual labor which should not get the same pay for the same work, because there is a difference between the casual labor and the permanent workmen. However, trade union view is very different. They believe that the casual labor is being exploited. They believe the high percentage of casual labor, even in core activities, is being used while it should not be used. They believe it should be the same work for the same way, whatever it means, whether the person has just joined today or he has worked for 10 to 20 years earlier in the organization and acquired a lot of skill and other things. They believe there's a very low social security for the casual labor, and they want regularization in terms of systems and processes on all these matters. Let's take the issue on downsizing employer. The Industrial Dispute Act, this is basically based on the Industrial Disputes Act. The industry viewpoint is there should be no hire and fire, but for removal of people, no prior permission should be required. Industry is probably open for higher severance compensation, but definitely does not like to have permissions to be taken for every time any hire and fire or any removal of people is required. Trade union view is hire and fire is absolutely not acceptable, and there must be a prior permission before any such action takes place. Let me take the second issue, that the simplification and rationalization of laws. Industry viewpoint is that labor laws are absolutely archaic. There are around 50 central laws and multiple state laws which are prevalent all over the country, and many of them are contradictory sometimes. There's the Inspector Raj which still continues, and it must come to a situation where there should not be any inspections coming to the company, and as far as possible we should have a process of self-certification. Simplification and rationalization required for competitiveness, which is extremely important if in this competitive world we have to exist and grow. Trade union view is changes are okay as long as labor interest is protected. They believe that they're okay with many changes in the labor laws, but ultimately the labor interest should be protected. I don't think there's too much of contradiction in thinking over here. Let's look at the trade union issues relating to trade unions. Industry view is we need to encourage only internal unions. We do not want external unions or external influences. There should be one union per plant or per company as far as possible. And there should not be any political affiliation or influence on internal unions from outside unions which are at the national level, who are in some way have arrangements or attachment with some political parties in the country. Now the trade union view is that industry discourages trade unions. They don't let the trade unions get formed. They don't like trade unions. They believe that trade unions play a very constructive role, and hence they are required. They also believe that isolation of internal unions from the external national unions deprives them from counsel and guidance. They believe that the internal unions don't have the wherewithal and the knowledge to manage on their own. They need external unions associated or connected with the political parties need to come and guide them. Now let us see what the situation is. If we were to look at the contract labor, it is here to stay. Even our discussions with national labor trade unions in various occasions in the last couple of months has shown that they believe that contract labor is probably will be there, and we have to find ways or means of making it a happy situation. They understand that there is a need of a contract labor. But the things to watch is, this is our view in CII, that we should not use contract labor as a labor cost reduction tool. On the other hand, we need to use contract labor for meeting the needs of flexibility which we need in production due to competitive market scenario which changes from time to time. We need to have a non-exploitive approach with the contract labor, whether it's in terms of compensation or it's in terms of other social benefits which they need. We need to have a fair and welfare approach with the contract labor. We must ensure there is a voice in the organization to listen to them and then act on their grievances. We also have to have some kind of a ratio and the type of contract labor which we use. We should not have unlimited size of contract labor. Between the permanent employees and the contract employees, some sensibility of ratio must be maintained. And of course, all the legal compliances which are required in managing a contract labor or having a contract labor must be fulfilled. The status today is industry not able to present. It's not only on contract labor, on many other matters, the industry is not able to present a unified view on many issues. We need to bring some consensus amongst us on various issues regarding whether it's contract labor or Industrial Dispute Act or various labor acts. Labor is far more organized today. Different trade unions have reconciled to work in a united manner, and hence they very often manage to get their way through. And of course, there's a huge trust deficit between the management and the union and even the workmen. There are some points for introspection going forward. We need to bring back focus on industrial relations. Somehow, over the years, industrial relations have been taken for granted, and it's time that we bring again focus on that. We need to develop industrial relations expertise in the organization. I have seen that more and more HR specialists like to keep away from industrial relations, and they believe that it's only the white collar and other aspects of industrial human relations which are more important than the industrial relations, and hence the expertise is not getting developed. We need to develop this expertise in the organization. We need to do much more of communication and trust building. The answer lies in communication, communication, and communication. We need fair, transparent, and inclusive work practices in the organizations. We need encouraging positive trade unionism. I am not saying that you must form a trade union in an organization that doesn't exist, but if it does exist or people are keen to form a trade union, we must encourage a positive trade unionism. Positioning labor as an appreciating asset and not a depreciating asset. While plant and machinery could depreciate, but labor should be taken as an appreciating asset. Some points to think and ponder is, industrial relations is a reflection of various social issues which we have around us. Issues will continue. The question is, are we equipped to handle them? There is no substitute to manufacture. There is no substitute to manufacturing. It's there to stay. We can't just live on services alone. Manufacturing will be the engine for growth for all time to come in our country. India is a developing country and needs to generate more employment, and I believe a large portion of it will come from manufacturing industry. Professional managers need to change their mindset and evaluate options that industry needs this and the country needs this. We need to look at both. It's time for repair and recuperation. We need, again, trust building and rebuilding of trust. We need partnerships with all the stakeholders. We need a social dialogue with all the stakeholders. We need communication. As I said, communication, and communication is the answer. We need much more listening than ever before. We need proportionate growth and internationalization, which is there to stay, and we need to recognize it. We need to respect rights of each other. We need to have a fair and firm approach in all that we do. And there's a sense of urgency in this whole process of repair and recuperation. And we need due diligence by recruiting, and the right mix is absolutely important when we get people into the organization. The way forward is create a countrywide code of conduct for regulating employment, the code of conduct for violence-free workplaces, a code of conduct which need to enhance industrial networking, focus on ground level activities, create awareness about positive trade union activities among the workforce, form joint committees of management and trade union representatives, create open channels for communication. And we need to build action on capability buildings. We need to train our union leaders, shop managers, HR managers in how to create a happy relationship on harmony and peace, as I mentioned earlier. They need to understand each other's duties and responsibilities. And if those are understood well, I'm sure many of the issues can be resolved on the shop floors. And for this, there's a role to play by educational and management institutes, with the government labor departments, the media, and of course, the CEOs. So we need to act today because such unrest affects all of us. Thank you. May I now request Mr. Vikram Kasbekar, who is the Senior Vice President of Hero MotoCorp, to give his views and his experiences in Hero MotoCorp. Here, Vikram.
Good morning, everybody. I think Mr. Jain has in detail explained the way forward, and I would not like to further repeat more on that. But one thing I would like to definitely say is when we talk of various aspects and actions, when we say communication, it's very simple to say communication. But what is really communication is what you're saying, has it been understood by that person whom you're communicating to? This is very, very important. It can happen through a number of things in which even the body language can explain to you how things are happening in a meeting or in a gathering, or even the eye contact and response of the people at large. So it's very important that you should know what you should communicate, how you should communicate. Another aspect which works most suitably in the long run is having a fair and firm approach. In an organization, the people always watch you, and you who are in the leadership position must demonstrate by an example. What you preach, you must practice. And at the same time, your actions, your commitment, and your way of working must be seen very transparently by the people at large. You need to be accessible. You must have your antenna very clearly aligned to what is the vibrations, what are things which are happening on the shop floor or in the factory at large. It's not possible always that we agree to what everybody says. But at the end of the day, I think it is very important that you do understand and you explain your point of view through a logic. Yes, it is very important. Some of the points which have been covered here are very, very important. If you see the last page, the recruit, 99% of the people are good. There might be some miscreants, but there are, I think, few which you can count on your fingertips. Everybody, when he comes to the work, he would like to see that he contributes something. So how do you keep these people engaged? Very, very important. It's not always an easy task, because problems, I'm not citing my experience, I'm talking about things in large. It's very easy to say, but end of the day, you must continuously innovate and do it and learn from the past mistakes, because nothing is right and 2 plus 2 is never 4 in any kind of an IR situation. It was talked about the situational circumstances of how situations change, and you have to act and behave at that point. So your team must be empowered within the framework to act as per the situation. Another very vital part of this entire exercise is how you sort of deal with your people. There are very small things which people come to you, and generally the persons on the shop floors are, according to me, the HR managers. If you have a good listening capability, it's not just listening. Yes, I've heard you, but post listening you must respond also. At the same time, if you have to say no, you must firmly say no and explain with the logic as to why you're saying no. And if it is yes, then you should be in a position to see that how you would implement that yes. So this is a training which is never taught in colleges or school. The engineers and the people who come onto the shop floor rarely go through people handling processes, and it comes out of experience. So as an industry, I think it is captured very well in the presentation also, that you need to very well understand how people issues will be dealt. And for that you can have some core teams, some small groups, case studies, because these things cannot be taught in a classroom. These things have to be taught through case studies, real life experiences, and what could be the probable solution to these kind of answers. At the end of the day, you will have to find your own solution. You can listen to others, you can get ideas from others, and try and implement those things which are most suitable for you. Another very important part which is captured in the presentation is the culture. One must understand the ethos. India is a multicultural country. It's very important that what happens in Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Karnataka, Maharashtra or Gujarat or Haryana would be quite different, and what happens in West Bengal would be quite different. Every place has its own culture, so one must respect and honor the culture and try and build your entire structure around it. There's nothing which is a quick fix solution. You need to adapt to those kind of situations and cultures, and as you start respecting the culture and respect those persons, you start developing respect for yourself. So at the end of the day, it's a mutual respect for each other, whether he's a helper or whether he's the CEO of the organization. A person as a human being must be respected, and you must honor and protect the local culture. I think the session has captured a lot of things, and more so if you have any queries, I think we are prepared to go through that. Thank you.